We've got another three best bets for you today for the Four Nations Face-Off and for the NBA. I'm Joe DeLeone here for the Sports Geek. This has been the first week we've been doing this, and so far, we're 5-3 on our picks. We're 4-2 in college basketball. We're 1-1 in the NHL for these Four Nation games. But now we give our first NBA bet, that coming later. Main focus today, and let's jump right into it. We've got the final for the Four Nations Face-Off between the USA and Canada. Now, I want to open this by saying a little bit of a biased pick. I try not to do this with my picks. I try not to let my fandom bleed into my decision making, but I can say this with everybody. This is a unique circumstance that we got to go with the USA, and we have to take the money line. We're going to put down the straight bet for USA to win this game against Canada because we've got a rooting interest. Now, the company I work for is Canadian. Hopefully I don't get a hard time for that. But as an American, I got to root for my guys to go out there and win. It's going to be a tough battle. The Canadian hockey team is always really freaking good. It's loaded with stars. The U.S., on the other hand, we saw the way that they played the first time. They played great on defense. Their goalkeeping was phenomenal. They were able to produce enough of the right scoring situations in order to win that game. I think that the U.S., how locked in they are, and we shouldn't use their last game's performance as an example of how they're going to show up against Canada. They're a little bit banged up. They were implementing and putting out different guys on the ice than they were against Canada the first time. It felt like there was an understanding that they had already lined up the championship matchup, that they weren't going to press too hard, and that led to them losing. The U.S. has every possibility to win this game, so I am taking USA moneyline. Let's get the homer pick out of the way. I'm taking the over at 5.5 again. Going into Monday's games, the over on all of these matchups, 3 out of the 4 times it had hit. Now it's 4 out of the 6 times because we split on those bets that I gave out on Monday. I think that there is still a very strong shot, and right now, as of Wednesday night when I'm taping this, the over is set at 5.5 on BetOnline. That might end up changing. I think a lot of people are going to be betting the over as they've been doing for a lot of these games. That line it might end up moving. But 5.5 is an accomplishable number for both of these teams. Especially, I played hockey in high school. I've been around hockey for a long time. A lot of times when we have matchups like this, where it's a bit more low scoring and defensive, games will swing in the opposite direction. There is going to be a lot more emphasis on creating scoring opportunities. There's going to be a lot more of an emphasis of being aggressive. So I think that hitting that over 5.5 is certainly in the possible cards to happen, and especially because there's just been a trend of 4 of the 6 games hitting the over. Now for the NBA game, we're going with one of the national broadcasted games as we do on this channel. We give out picks for the games that everybody is going to be watching. We're not going to be digging into the weeds, giving crazy player props for somebody on the bench to go over or under on points. No, I want to give you guys a reason to sit and watch and bet on games. Maybe if you're out at a bar with your buddies, to be able to have a rooting interest, even if your teams aren't playing. Celtics are favored -7.5 versus the 76ers. I hope this doesn't move, and I implore everybody to take this if it doesn't move at 7.5. If this thing pushes 10, I probably wouldn't touch it because it's going to be too wide of a margin. But I would take the Celtics -7.5 to cover against 76ers. I was reading a little bit into head coach Nick Nurse talking about the injury situation with this team and how he feels about Joel Embiid. It did not sound like he was very optimistic that Embiid, even if he does play, is at 100%. I don't know if that's coach speak trying to maybe put off of a signal to the opposing team that make it seem like it's worse than it actually is, and Embiid goes out there and lights things up, and he's actually fully healthy. Coaches do this all the time. But reading his comments about practice the other day, it didn't sound great. And the rest of this roster has been incredibly banged up. They were awful before the All-Star break, and I don't think after the All-Star break, that's going to change. One offensive and defensive statistic that stood out to me, we know that Boston's great at shooting threes and making threes. They're 11th in the NBA in three-point shooting percentage. The 76ers are terrible defensively, 23rd in three-point shooting defense. They're giving up a ton of made threes to opponents. And then this is the nail in the coffin for me. Boston is 5th in 2-point shooting percentage, while the 76ers are 30th in defending 2-pointers. I think that this 7.5 is accomplishable. Having watched, I'm very anti-Boston, by the way, so this is kind of making up for my homer pick earlier. I've watched enough Celtics games this season to see those spurts where they just get hot and they get into a rhythm and they pull away, they separate, and the game's over. They're that type of a team because they're one of the few teams in the NBA that has a ton of scoring options. So this is a situation going up against a dead body of a 76ers team that they get hot, they get cooking in the third quarter, and they cover the 7.5, and they're able to win the ball game. So that is the last of the 3 picks. Quickly to recap the success that we had on the last bets that we did on the last show. In case you missed it, we took Michigan State minus 3.5 versus Purdue. That ended up cashing. We ended up cashing on Wisconsin minus 3.5 versus Illinois. But we did not end up getting Texas A&M plus 1.5 versus Mississippi State. That's going to be it for me, folks. Let me know in the comments below. Who are you betting on? What picks do you like today that maybe I missed? Hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.